Welcome to The Explainer. So today we are going to tackle a philosophical puzzle that goes right to the very heart of reality itself. It's all based on the work of the ancient thinker Nagarjuna, and let me tell you, it's a question that seriously challenges our most basic assumptions about how the world even works. It seems like such a simple question, doesn't it? I mean, a sprout comes from a seed. A sound comes from a bell. Easy. But what if I told you that when we look at that process with some really intense logical scrutiny, the entire concept of coming from just completely falls apart? Okay, let's dive right in. Here's how we're going to break this down. We're going to start with the basic idea of something coming into being, then look at all the possible ways that could happen, and then we'll tackle the most common sense explanation and see how it all leads to this radical, kind of mind-blowing new perspective on reality. All right, first up, let's dig into this fundamental idea of arising, that seemingly magical moment when something goes from not being there to being there. This is ground zero for us, right? It's just our everyday experience. We see things pop into existence all the time. But Nagarjuna's whole critique kicks off by taking this simple, common sense idea and putting it under this incredibly powerful logical microscope to see if it actually holds up. So what he does is, he lays out only 4 possible ways that anything could ever come into being. Just 4. And then, he just systematically demolishes each one, showing why it's ultimately impossible. This whole 4-pronged attack is known as the tetralemma. Now, what's so clever about this is how it frames the entire problem. The argument is, look, if something truly arises, its origin story has to fit into one of these 4 boxes. There is no 5th option. So, let's put them to the test. Okay, first up, can a thing just arise from itself? Well, think about it for a second. For something to generate itself, it would have to already exist, right? But if it already exists, the whole act of arising is completely redundant. It's totally pointless. And you could even get stuck in an endless loop of self-creation. And the other options? Well, they fall apart just as fast. If things arose from another, you'd have utter chaos. A flame could pop out of a seed. Darkness could produce light. From both just inherits the problems from the first 2. And arising from no cause, that's just completely absurd. If that were true, anything could just blink into existence for no reason, making any kind of effort totally meaningless. Okay, and this brings us right to the heart of the puzzle. If all 4 logical paths are dead ends, what are we left with? And I bet I know what you're thinking right now, because it's the most obvious objection, and it's the exact same one Nagarjuna's critics brought up centuries ago. Let's get into the most common sense defense, right? The obvious answer. Things don't just arise from some random other. They arise from a specific set of conditions. A sprout doesn't come from a rock. Of course not. It comes from the condition of a seed plus water plus soil plus sunlight. This is the classic comeback. Ancient philosophers were big believers in cause and effect. They argued that it's all real, and they even organized it into what they called the 4 conditions. For them, this was the engine that powered the entire universe. So they really broke it all down. You had the main cause, like the seed, the context it appears in, the moment that came right before it, and any other big factors. This whole framework was their solid explanation for a predictable, orderly universe. But this is where the analysis gets really sharp. See, he doesn't just reject the idea of conditions. He goes deeper. He questions the very logic of what a condition can even be a condition for. And this just turns the whole argument on its head. For the logic of cause and effect to work, the cause, the seed, and the effect, the sprout, have to be 2 different things. That seems obvious. But Nagarjuna points out this critical timing problem that actually makes a relationship between them completely impossible. And boom, this is the knockout punch. For the seed to be a condition for the sprout, they have to be able to relate to each other. But here's the thing, they never exist at the same time. When the seed is a seed, the sprout is just nowhere. It doesn't exist. And by the time the sprout shows up, the seed is gone. There is no moment of connection. So you see the dilemma, right? It's a logical checkmate. A condition can't be for something that already exists. That's just pointless. But it also can't be for something that doesn't exist, because how can you have a condition for literally nothing? Neither option works. And the ancient commentary has this brilliant way of illustrating just how absurd this is. Claiming a cause creates some non-existent effect is like trying to use the wealth of an unborn child. You're trying to make a transaction with something that simply isn't there. So, after tearing down these fundamental ideas of arising and conditions, the argument doesn't just leave us in the dust with nothing. Instead, it offers this really radical, new way of understanding the reality that we all experience every single day. The final conclusion is not that the world is an illusion or that nothing exists. Not at all. The point is that our whole model for how it exists, this neat little chain of independent things causing other independent things to pop into existence, is fundamentally flawed. The answer he proposes is mere convention. And what that means is, yeah, the world works. Seeds do, for all practical purposes, lead to sprouts. It's a useful, reliable pattern we observe. It's a story that holds true on the surface. But this functional reality isn't built on some ultimate findable chain of cause and effect. It's more like a deeply interconnected relational dance, where no single thing has its own independent start. So let's just recap the big ideas here. When we really try to zoom in and find that exact moment of arising, it just slips right through our fingers. The whole idea of a separate cause making a separate effect, it just dissolves into a paradox. What we're left with is this functional, conventional world that works beautifully, not because things pop into existence on their own, but because everything is just radically interconnected. And that leaves us with a final, really provocative question for you. If those neat lines of cause and effect we rely on are more like a useful story than an absolute truth, what does that mean for you? How does that change the way you see your own actions, your relationships, and your place in a universe that might just be far more mysterious and interconnected than we ever imagined?